Hey, Avila Microeconomics students. I hope everyone is having a good weekend. We're just about wrapping up Chapter 3, so make sure to get everything in there before midnight tonight on our date 7/12/2020. So make sure that writing assignment, get that in too. So we're approaching the halfway point of the course already. So as I said, these classes go so quickly. So it's so imperative to stay on top of things and plan things ahead of time and do things early in the week so that way you don't feel stressed to do everything on the weekend. So, but this week, you're going to read chapters 22 and 23. You're going to look at the concepts of cost and our first market structure perfect competition in chapter 23. You're going to do your forum discussion, continue with your My Econ Lab with Pearson, homework on that for 22 and 23. And then finally, you're going to have an exam that's going to be open on, I believe, July 13th this week. You'll have 300 minutes to complete it. So make sure you get that done before Sunday at midnight too. So I want to give you a little bit of overview of the chapters this week, give you some insights to the readings, help you think about this. But first, chapter 22, the authors distinguish between the short run and the long run. And the reason they do this is that in the short run, you're going to have some costs that are fixed. That you think about a store in a strip mall, they've signed a lease. They have rent that is due monthly for a period of time. Interestingly enough, I've talked to some people who work in commercial real estate, and rents can vary widely between those stores, and sometimes even those businesses are restricted to share how much they're paying in rent because it's a negotiated item. So, but nonetheless, it's a fixed cost. So even if you don't have business, you're still liable to pay that rent. So some other things you're going to look at too is the idea of a production function. There are inputs in anything we do. And I was talking to my wife this weekend about the examples. She has a friend that works at the high school, but also works, 5 hours on the weekend as one of their shoppers. And you often see them in grocery stores now. It's really kind of changed the way that we do grocery shopping now. More and more people are shopping online, so they don't have to go into the stores, especially with COVID-19. You see that at Walmart. They got those super huge carts that get in your way. I don't know if it's the best, most efficient way that they do it, but that's their process. Hy-Vee, you'll see these kind of freezer trucks outside. They put the groceries in there and people drive by and pick it up. But anyway, with that, over time, they're eventually going to figure out more efficient ways to do this more productively at a lower cost. But as you're doing anything, you're going to have what's called the law of diminishing returns. You just can't have this idea that you keep adding and adding some input while other variables fix and just expect the output's going to go up. I'll give you an example like farming in a garden. I tried it a few years ago with my boys. Not so successful, but we had fun doing it. But it's just like fertilizer. Okay, you add a certain amount of fertilizer, there's a cost to it. You add some more fertilizer, there's an additional cost, but how much more is the yield going to be? And at some point, you keep adding fertilizer, you're going to kill off all your vegetables because it's too acidic. So, farmers are always looking for that right combination of inputs to maximize their yields and to maximize their profits. And that's the same thing all firms do about trying to make decisions and getting back to the kind of online shopping and going to the grocery store now and picking things up. In Europe, they have entire warehouse systems that are huge, the size of like 20 football fields, that deliver it by vans. That may or may not work here, but it kind of reminds me of the Denver airport, if you ever saw the inner workings of that and how all the luggage is moved around. They have mega computer systems that have algorithms that kind of figure out once the order is placed, what's the most efficient way to get everything off the shelves. Amazon does this same thing too. But without these algorithms and technology, they would not be able to do this. And at Hy-Vee and these other places, Walmart, as they figure things out and they figure out how to do it in a more productive, more efficient way, less cost, we call that technically and economically efficient. Economically efficient, you do it at the lowest cost. Technically, you're doing with the fewest resources. So we'll probably see more shifts, and some days, we'll have these warehouses and backs of Hy-Vees. It's just they punch the button, the order as soon as it comes in, or it comes to the computer. There's a robot that goes, picks the things up, puts it in a bin, has it ready, ships it out, and you're ready to pick it up in a line. Even something simple as you think about McDonald's years ago, When you go through the drive-through, instead of having one lane, they now have 2 lanes, and they've increased their efficiency, and they get the orders through faster, and by doing that, they have more customers, and they increase their profits. So managers are always thinking about that way, especially the use of technology to try to be more productive. So some other things you're going to look at this chapter, you're going to look at the cost curve, especially on page 493. The reason we mention all that about productivity and diminishing marginal productivity is that you're going to see a U-shaped in these cost curves. Initially, costs are going down, but they're going to go back up, and that's because of diminishing marginal productivity. But with this, you're going to have the idea of marginal cost, which is the change in total cost over the change in quantity as I produce more. You're going to have average fixed cost. Fixed costs are, you have a certain amount of fixed cost that doesn't change in the short run. But as I produce more and more, my average total cost will decline. It will never go to zero, but it will keep declining. This is what we typically call spreading of overhead cost. You have variable costs that are the change as I hire another worker, another input. Those are just simply variable cost divided by the quantity that you're producing. And the two of them together, average fixed cost plus average variable cost, give you average total cost. Now, when we start to get into looking at the long run, is the assumption that I can have maybe these different size plants, different cost curves, short run cost curves associated with each type of facility. I use plants as a simple example, but it could be a service too. I'll give you a very simple example. I was born in Marsh, Missouri. I call it the town that means well. I love it. But if you go to Marsh, Missouri, there's not a lot of really good restaurants where I have like in Lee Summit. But they do have an Applebee's, but it's a mini Applebee's. They can't afford to do a full-scale Applebee's, so they have a much smaller scale of production because they just don't get enough customers to justify a big store. So I want you to think of it in terms of that way. What's the most efficient way? And plants can make decisions, as the growth expands, like Amazon. They're making these, plants making decisions about which city is going to have the kind of the distribution center. I can't remember who won the contract, if they're still debating on that. But they'll make decisions about that. And again, the idea is to try to drive it to the lowest possible cost. All right. Last is chapter 23 with perfect competition. With perfect competition, that's our first market structure we study. One thing I would argue today is because of technology, markets are becoming more perfectly competitive in the sense that information is available to anyone. I can look it up on a phone. I can see where the lowest price is. I can go to that store. Often stores will recognize that, and if you talk to them, they may be willing to negotiate on price. I know, like at Dick's, if I go, I think it's Academy Sports, if I go in there, or Dick's or vice versa, if I show the advertisement that says, hey, Dick's is selling at this price, or American is selling at this price, the Academy, then they will match that. It's a policy because they know it, it has to deal with competition, a perfect competition. Essentially, perfect competition, though, it's I like to use the example wheat. Wheat is wheat. You can't change wheat a lot, whether it's grown in Missouri or Kansas. It's a homogeneous product. There's a large number of buyers and sellers in the markets. There's many farmers that produce wheat, many buyers that buy wheat. It's easy to enter and exit out of the market. And we assume that farmers are trying to be economically efficient. They have to, when they go to the mill to sell their wheat, they have to accept whatever price is determined in the market. Now, in the market, you may remember that traditional supply and demand curve. There are forces that shift demand and supply that determine what the price is. But really, for the farmer, their demand curve is perfectly elastic. It's a horizontal demand curve. So they have to accept whatever price is established in the market. And they are what we call a price taker. So they can't go to the mill and say, well, I know it's $5 a bushel, but I'm demanding $6. Put your fist down. And they'll say, like, nope, it's $5. You take it or leave it. So farmers may withhold grain and kind of wait, see if prices change. But it's one unique kind of example that says you have to accept whatever price is in the market. Some would even say the stock market is a good example of a perfectly competitive market. People are constantly competing about information about the stock price, where it should be. And that stock price should change instantaneously as soon as any new information about how the company is doing is released. And that's why, the SEC wants to make sure that the markets are efficient. And if you believe in efficient market hypothesis, that stock price should adjust quickly like that. So you don't really have a time to go in there and make a gain on it because so many people are competing for information. On the other hand, although the market's becoming more competitive with information, one concern, though, in the United States is, though, that you may start to see in this movement that there are less choices available between firms. You think about like how Amazon is putting a lot of small businesses out of place. This idea that banks, I've seen this, I was in the banking industry years ago, but it used to be we had like 14, 15,000 banks in the United States. You kept seeing consolidation, consolidation, consolidation. It may be that we end up with just what we call like oligopolies in the United States, something we'll talk about later. But it's really just a few firms competing against each other, and that can have different impacts to markets. It can be still competitive, but it leads to potential collusion, and that can be a concern. Like you see that with the mobile carriers, like with Sprint and T-Mobile merging recently. So, all right, so to kind of wrap this chapter up, I just want to kind of talk about the 4 different scenarios. So what you're going to have is, you have this elastic demand curve for the farmer or perfectly competitive firm. You throw the cost curves on top of that, and there's 4 different scenarios. One is where the price is equal to average total cost. That's just you're making a normal profit. If your price is above that average total cost, you're making an economic profit. You're doing above and beyond. And since as many people can enter the market as they want, if somebody sees you're making an economic profit, competitors are going to come in. They should, in theory, continue to come in to where the price is just equal to that average total cost. If your price is between average total cost and average variable cost, the decision is to continue to produce in the short run to cover some of those fixed costs, because you'll at least be better off than shutting down. But if your price is equal to average variable cost or below that, that's what we call the shutdown point. And really at that point, that's what you've seen recently with the COVID-19, that some businesses have just made the decision that we're going bankrupt, we're shutting down. A lot of firms right now in COVID-19 are really trying to reduce cost. I've even seen that in my field of higher education. Missouri Western, here's a good example. Missouri Western up in St. Joe has reached the shutdown point for some of their programs, not their institution. They've decided to eliminate a lot of humanities. It says, well, we can't afford to keep this running based on the revenues we're getting in. Now, where I work at a community college, we haven't done this yet, but some of my colleagues at University of South Missouri, UMKC have all had to take pay cuts. That may have happened at Avila too, in order just to, because you don't have as many revenues coming in, not as many students coming in. If you don't have auxiliary enterprises such as revenues coming in from residence halls, you got to make some cuts. And if you can't do this, eventually you get to the point where your costs are greater than your revenues. And if you don't have enough backup or lines of credit, it reaches the shutdown point. So that's what we're seeing. That is some concern right now with the COVID-19, is which firms are going to survive. We call this kind of creative, I would say called population ecology. I like to call it as that, survival of the fittest. And COVID-19 eventually will go away. It would maybe take a year. But after that, certain businesses that used to be around may not be around anymore, or even certain colleges, smaller schools, may not be around anymore if they can't figure out ways to kind of get through this time period and keep enrollments up. So, okay, well, that's a summary of this week. I've kind of gone a little bit longer than I wanted, but I want to there's a lot of information I want to get to you. So if you do have any questions, do send me an email via Canvas, and I'll get back to you. But have a great week, and look forward to talking to you online. Take care.